Hello and welcome back to another Rush Duel Links video. Today we're going to take a look at the new leaks we just got for Rush Duel. So we did get some speed leaks as well as some rush leaks, but we're going to primarily focus on the rush stuff because obviously this is a rush focused channel. But we did get the selection box for speed. Very thankful we did not get one for rush because we really did not want one. But we did get the deck build box boost red boot. So a lot of people had speculated, myself included, that this would be a structure deck because we only got one skill data mined a little while ago. When that skill did get data mined, I did make some predictions about what I thought might be in this. Now, at the time, we were going under the assumption it was a structure deck, so our predictions were a little bit more focused towards that. But we did, during that stream, predict that we would be getting the flip and the flap dragon, so at least we have that. So let's talk about some of these cards. So the first one, Red Boot Boost Dragon, is an interesting card. So he's only got 2400 attack, which is not fantastic, right? At this point, everyone kind of understands if you don't have 2500 attack, you are under par. So not great off the bat. But we can choose up to 7 dragon-type monsters in your graveyard, inflict damage to your opponent equal to the number of chosen monsters times 100, and this card gains attack equal to the number of chosen monsters times 100 until the end of this turn. Then, shuffle the cards chosen into the deck. So we can burn our opponent for a maximum of 700, we can gain a maximum of 700 attack, which will put us up to 31. That's fine, but this is quite a heavy requirement. Having to get 7 dragon monsters in the graveyard and put them all back into our deck is quite a steep cost, especially to only go up to 3100 attack. Realistically, on its own, this card is nothing fantastic. I mean, 7's Rogue Magician most of the time is better than this card. We also recently got Voidvelg Requiem, which is basically this card but better most of the time. So Red Boot Boost Dragon will be better later on when we get access to a lot of its fusion support, but until then, this card unfortunately is not going to be doing anything particularly crazy. Next up, we have Fantasia Strike Dragon Mirror Gear Star F. So this is the second Luke fusion and is another high dragon. So this is made using Illusion Strike Dragon Mirror Gears and the dragon. We can send the top card of our deck to the graveyard and then either up to 3 face-up monsters on your opponent's field lose 1500 attack until the end of this turn. And then this turn, this card can make 2 attacks on monsters. So that's pretty good. If our opponent has 3 face-up attack position monsters, we can reduce them by a total of 4,500, which is sort of like getting an extra 4,500 damage in, which can be really, really good. Or this turn it can attack directly, so 3,000 attack attacking directly is still very strong as half of your opponent's starting life. And against a lot of decks, that is going to either be a way to close out games or a way to apply a lot of pressure. The only thing I'm hesitant about this is Psychic Fusion is a deck that is currently very prominent in the meta. That deck has ways to boost its life points by a lot. If you're attacking someone and they've got 6,000 life points and you take off 3,000, taking off half of their life points is very, very strong. If you attack someone who has 10,000 life points and you only take off 3,000, suddenly that doesn't seem as appealing. Basically, whenever you're attacking directly, you tend to be trying to close out the game. You're applying pressure through your opponent's board, and you're effectively trying to end the game as quickly as you can. But we are in a meta right now where the most dominant deck doesn't really let you do that, which is why we have seen a lot of other decks struggling because they just aren't able to get damage in that is substantial enough to actually close the game. So I think this card is going to be good. I don't know how good it's going to be. I really want to get my hands on it and test with it, but I think this could be really, really strong. And one other thing to take note of that's also really, really good is that we can use this with the Dragia Star Nova skill. Because the Dragia Star Nova skill simply boosts the attack of a level 7 light attribute monster that's a dragon, or lets us search the dragon and fusion, which again are both parts of Mirror Gear Star. So you can basically just slot this immediately in there without needing a new skill, which is really good. And this does also apply to Sturdy Strike Dragon Meta Gear Star F, which we haven't got yet, but it is technically also future-proofed for this card as well. So next up, we have Whispering Fairy as an SR. So Whispering Fairy, originally, I believe this was either in the very first set or it came out in the yugioh structure deck. So this was a card that was basically around forever in the OCG, and it's actually a little bit surprising we've taken this long to get it. For the longest time, you would just play this as your wind option when playing 7's Rogue Magician because you just wanted to have wind spellcasters, and this was the best option. So what does this card do? 800 attack, 1200 defense. 1200 defense is actually not bad. If there is a lot of piercing going around in the meta, then having high defense is always going to be better. We can send 1 card from our hand to the graveyard. That is quite a steep cost, especially for where we are right now in Rush's lifespan. Sending a card from your hand to the graveyard is not really what we want to be doing, but we can shuffle up to 2 monsters from your opponent's graveyard into the deck. So this effect can be useful, But we don't yet have many of the really beneficial effects that really want to have specific cards in the graveyard. We don't have Miracle Fusion, we don't have Seven's Wonder Fusion, we don't have a lot of the cards that fuse from grave. And when we start getting those sorts of effects, that is when Whispering Fairy is really going to be key, or effects like Whispering Fairy, in shutting down those big combos. However, this still does have some use against, let's say, machine good stuff. They're going to want specific machines in the graveyard to use things like Jointech Leo to get back the Ancient Gear Golem. You're going to have things like Cyber Dragon, want to keep their Cyber Dragons in the graveyard so they can bring them out with their spell card. You can get rid of your opponent's high-level machines so that your opponent can't boost Innovator quite as much. There are still uses for this card, but I don't see this card really seeing a ton of play right now. Now, in the future, this card might see more play, but I think there are cards that have this effect that are just better. So realistically, I'm not expecting Whispering Fairy to really do much of anything. And another card I also don't expect to really do anything is Wispark Fairy Girl. So this is a fusion monster made using Sparkheart's Girl, which is now freshly unlimited, and Whispering Fairy. It only has 2200 attack, which is not great, and it's level 7, so it doesn't get that fusion protection. But we can send one card from our hand to the graveyard to shuffle up to 2 monsters from your opponent's graveyard into the deck. Again, this effect is fine, but it's nothing like game-breaking right now. And then you can make all face-up monsters on your opponent's field lose 500 attack to the end of this turn. Now, if we used Sparkheart Girl's effect before we use this, we would effectively get to double up and get a double reduction, which is nice. It's okay. It's nothing crazy though, right? Realistically, I don't think this is going to be worth the 3-card investment to get it out. It's going to be cute for like some rogue builds or just have a bit of fun. I don't think this is going to be a competitively viable card. Next up, we have Flapdragon. So Flapdragon, 0 attack, 200 defense, very, very poor stats. But we can send one dragon-type monster from our hand to the graveyard to change one face-down monster on your opponent's field to face-up attack position. So let's break this down. First off, we have to send specifically a dragon card, not just a card, not just a monster. It has to be a dragon that we send from our hand to the graveyard. That already is not great. We don't really want to be discarding any cards, let alone a specific type of card. So already not great. But then we can change a face-down monster on your opponent's field to face-up attack position. So this is actually pretty good, because this allows us to get to our opponent's life points. We just flip something up and attack over it. Bam, we've got some damage in. We can combine this with something like Fantasia Strike Dragon Mirror Gear Star F. So now we flip the monster up and then we can reduce its attack by 1500. So that's another thing that we can do with this. We could also flip up one of our opponent's weaker monsters and then use something like Blue Fang and use its effect to pop the monster. So there is a lot of different things we can do with Flapdragon, and that's just using this first 2 effects. Its other effect is then if the only face-up monsters on your field are dragon-type monsters, you can special summon one Flip Dragon from your graveyard to your field in face-up defense position. So that's pretty cool. We basically get to give up a card, change a monster's battle position, and then replace the card that we discarded with another body. So it does break even. It doesn't plus, which is a bit of a shame, but at least it breaks even. That is at least something. And then Flip Dragon is basically the same thing in reverse. We still have to send a dragon monster from our hand to the graveyard, but then we can change an attack position monster to face down defense. Now, there aren't going to be many situations where a monster being face down is really going to matter, but there will be some situations where, for example, your opponent needs a certain type on their field, and by getting rid of a monster, let's say they only have one monster and it's a machine, we can flip that down, and then any of their trap cards that require machine monsters to be face up on the field won't work. Now, it's not really relevant right now, but in terms of like future-proofing, this could be useful in the future. Primarily, this is just going to be change something to defense so we can attack over it. If we have some sort of piercing, that'd be even better, but realistically, the only piercing dragon is really going to have access to is going to be Drageastar, but it still exists. But then, once again, if the only face-up monsters on our field are dragon types, we can special summon a Flapdragon from your graveyard to your field in face-up defense position. Now, one big thing to note is you have to have dragon-type monsters on your field, which means if we do get out one of our high dragon fusions, we won't be able to resolve the second half of these dragons' effects. So we have to make sure we use them before we summon out our fusions if we're planning to fusion summon during that turn. But Flip and Flapdragon still are pretty useful. They're not crazy, they're nothing insane, they're not like, whoa, the best dragon cards of all time, but they are very, very solid for what they are. Next up, we'll talk about the upcoming cards that are coming via events. So in the event that released today, or I suppose yesterday as of the release of this video, we will have just gotten the Predator Ganleon, which is quite an interesting card. This card is interesting in the sense that it is one of Yugioh's boss monsters, and we are expecting him to be a character. I personally never considered this his ace monster. I've always considered his ace monster to be Ecdysis Kaiserleon. So in my opinion, this doesn't rule him out as being a playable character, but it would be very weird still to see one of his bosses show up like this and then release him as a character with all his unlocks like normal. It does seem a bit weird. So this kind of now puts us more in the camp of he might not be a playable character, but I still think it would make sense from 2B. We'll have to wait and see what happens. But 2500 attack is pretty good. Unfortunately, his effect is not. So if your life points are 1000 or lower, send the top 5 cards of your deck to the graveyard. Okay, so we're milling 5. We have to be on 1000 or lower life, which is a little bit awkward sometimes. But this card gains attack equal to the difference between your life points and your opponent's life points until the end of this turn. So this is a very situational effect, and it's sort of like a mini Magnum Overlord. Realistically, I don't see this card seeing any play at all. If we do get more reptile support, maybe this becomes a boss if we get a good enough skill for it, but realistically, this isn't going to do anything. Then we're going to talk about the insect cards, and the first one is Flying Kamakiri number 2. So Flying Kamakiri is just another 1500 beta. There's not really much to talk about with this card, but it's just kind of filling out the insect list. And then the more interesting one is our boss monster, Deinasdorcus, the Beetle King. The 2500 attack, really good attack stat. Shuffle 3 monsters from your graveyard into the deck. Notably, these can be any monsters, which means we don't have to lock ourselves into just an insect deck. Destroy 1 face-up level 5 to 8 insect-type monster on your opponent's field. So making your opponent's monsters insects is kind of the insect thing, so that's not too difficult. The issue is this only works on 5 to 8, so if your opponent only has weaklings on the board, we can't pop any of those. And most of the fusion monsters are going to be level 9, and maximums are level 10, so this won't work on them. So it's a little bit specific. But when this card does come out, assuming the meta doesn't shift dramatically, pretty much every deck in the game is still playing a bunch of cards that this will still work on. The only one that really dodges this super hard is going to be Metarion, but other than that, every other deck typically will be summoning either a level 7 or a level 8 monster most of the time. The Deinasdorcus, not the craziest boss monster ever, but really, really nice and will be really useful for free-to-play players. Now, we also have the Metarion cards. These are going to come with the Yuo rerun. We have Snake Clown, level 5, not the best. Obviously, we'd rather this wasn't level 5, but it's a 1700 attack monster. It's just going to be there for fusion material. Notably, though, we can get this back with Star Restart, because Star Restart does specifically say a level 5 or lower normal monster, so that is at least something. And then we have the boss monster, Metarion King Cobra Star, made using Snake Clown and Imaginary Actor. 3000 attack is not bad. But we can send 1 card from our hand to the graveyard. Again, we really don't want to be sending a card from our hand to the graveyard. To either draw 2 cards and then send a card from your hand to the graveyard, so we break even. We're just filtering through our deck. This could be useful if we really need to see a certain combo piece, or if we really need like traps, like if we really need a legend trap to survive the next turn, we could just use this effect, try and dig through our deck to find it. Or up to 3 face-up reptile type monsters on your opponent's field lose 1000 attack and defense to the end of this turn. This card can attack twice during this turn. So being able to attack twice is quite nice. Unfortunately, there aren't really that many reptiles going around, so the other part of the effect is not going to be super useful. Obviously, we still have type change beam, and that is a thing. We do also have Predator Ganglion, who is going to be a reptile. And because of both of these cards, this could hint that the next box we do get is going to have a lot of reptiles in it. Now, what I think would make sense personally is that we get a lot of the normal reptile support from Go Rush, rather than the Yugioh stuff. Maybe you could mix in a couple of Yugioh cards, but primarily give us the normal Go Rush cards, which we'll probably make a video about in the future, but I think those would make the most sense to come out in the next box. But to go with our new Yuo cards, we are getting a new Yuo skill, and that is Mystical Script. So it can be activated from turn 2 onwards if all of the monsters in your constructed deck are light attribute monsters with 500 defense and or fairy type monsters with 2000 defense. Which basically means the deck has to be just Metarion cards and just Gyakateno cards. But multi-choice effect, we can either send 1 imaginary actor from your deck to the graveyard once per duel, which is nice, just be able to search it, or 1 face-up monster on your field that was tribute summoned this turn gains 900 attack until the end of this turn. So this is kind of cool, because 900 attack is quite an interesting number. Snake Clown is a level 5 monster, which we could obviously tribute summon, and then boost its attack up to 26, which is not bad. We can use that to clear over 25s. And the other obvious monster we can use to take advantage of this is going to be Gyakateno Megami, because again, we can boost this by 900 up to 27, and basically just play this like level 6 vanilla beatdown style deck, which I think does seem kind of fun. I don't think it's going to be particularly competitive, but it is an option. And again, if we were to use it with Gyakateno Megami, then we could boost this up to 33, which again is not a super relevant number, but getting above 3000 still can matter. And then the other skill that we're getting is RB Drive, so it can be activated from turn 2 onwards if all of the monsters in your constructed deck are dragon type monsters and Blue Fang Burst Dragon and Red Boot Boost Dragon are the only level 5 or higher effect monsters in your constructed deck. So quite restrictive, it has to be dragons, but that's nothing new. Dragons are typically very xenophobic in Rush. They have a lot of cards that say all the cards in your graveyard have to be dragons and high dragons, or all the cards on your field have to be dragons. So that's nothing new. Multi-choice effect, we can either take 2 cards, a Red Boot Boost Dragon and or level 4 or lower light attribute monsters. Now, notably, these are going to have to be level 4 or lower light attribute dragon monsters because our deck can only have dragons in it. From your deck, add one of them to your hand, send the other card to the graveyard. This effect can be used once going first and twice going second. So this is a little bit awkward. So this skill can't be used on turn 1 anyway, and if you go first, you also don't get to +2 off of this, which is a little bit disappointing, but I can understand why. So this is pretty interesting because there are a lot of options for this right now. Obviously, we have the brand new Flip and Flap Dragon. These are going to be great targets for this because we can just grab one of them to our hand and send the other one straight to the graveyard. We can also use this to obviously grab the Red Boot itself, which is going to be really good. But this is also really good for future-proofing. A lot of the fusion support that we're going to get in the future, such as Booster Wyvern and DBF Rebuilder, are all light dragons that are level 4 or lower. So being able to search out any of these is going to be really good. And the one that I think a lot of people are going to have their eye on is going to be the Lightwave Dragon, which again is going to be really, really good and is really going to make Blue Fang Dragon really, really strong when it does eventually come out. And again, this skill will search this when it eventually does come out. Then there's also the legend card Mirage Dragon could also technically be searched with this. So when this comes out, that is another option. So there is a lot of very interesting things that could happen in the future with this. But as for right now, this skill is like fine. Getting 2 free pluses is nice. I don't think this is going to be anything crazy. I don't think this is going to be ridiculous. I think this will be a fine like tier 4 type deck. But the other effect is that we can make one face monster in your opponent's field lose 400 attack until the end of this turn. 400 is like, it's fine. It's nothing like super crazy. If you think about it, we can boost the Red Boot itself up to 31. Then we can reduce something by 400. So we can either attack over a 34 or crash into a 35, which aren't that relevant in terms of attack stats. So not super great. And we are still locked into using Blue Fang, but a 400 reduction realistically isn't going to make most monsters able to be popped by that Blue Fang effect. So it's again, nothing too crazy, but this skill looks fine. But that is it for the leaks. Overall, I think I'm quite happy with this. I am quite looking forward to getting my hands on the Mirror Gearstar. I think this is really the interesting part of these leaks. Red Boot, again, will be good later. With Spark Fairy Girl, I don't know what they're thinking with this, but it had to come out somewhere, so why not here? I think realistically, I would have preferred that this was a structure deck because this would have cost me less gems to collect these all. Realistically, we're not getting that many new cards, and I'm still going to have to go through this box 3 entire times to get all of them, and that's just going to cost a lot of gems, which is not the best. But other than that, I'm quite happy with this, and I'm looking forward to get a hold of new cards. So, thanks for watching, and I'll see you next time.